Inanimate Insanity Season 2, in my opinion, is the best season of any object show to ever be made. And there's a lot of reason why I believe this. I feel like Mephone is a great host. I think Meepad and Toilet are great co-hosts in addition to this season. I think the characters added were also super cool. I think the characters they brought back from Season 1 were great additions. I really like the challenges and the character interactions, but there is one thing in particular that I do not like about this season, and that is Baseball, and I believe he was the worst character in Inanimate Insanity Season 2. But before we get into that, I'm doing a $100 giveaway. All you have to do is comment a number between 1 and 1,000 on all the videos I post in September. And at the end of the month, I'll pick a winner at the end of September and they will get a $100 gift card. Anyways, I feel like Baseball being the worst character in Inanimate Insanity is a kind of a bold statement because he was 3rd place in the season. But I feel like Baseball should not finish anywhere near 3rd and was basically irrelevant to the whole storyline. Well, let's go back to where it all started in episode 1. We see Nickel, Baseball, and Suitcase form an alliance, and that is one of the biggest plots of the whole season. And then Baseball wins his challenge in the first episode, which makes him a team captain, which is also a pretty big storyline, I guess. And you'll see why I say that later in the video. But again, these are two topics that get brought up a lot this season, and more the season progresses, the more we focus on this alliance between Nickel, Suitcase, and Baseball. And we get to see a lot of favoritism in this alliance. Baseball and Nickel are obviously a lot closer with each other than they are with Suitcase, and a lot of times it feels like Suitcase is being left out of the alliance or felt not as important. In the pre-merge of Inanimate Insanity, Baseball is basically one of the main characters, or at least it's persuaded that way, because in a lot of the marketing, he was like the face of Inanimate Insanity in the beginning. His team, the Grand Slams, got a lot of screen time, and a lot of the episodes had a really big focus on them. But in the Grand Slam episodes, when it mainly focused on them, or when it was focused on them, it mainly felt like it was on that alliance plus Balloon. And we're going to get into that in a second. But Baseball seemed to be like in the beginning. Baseball was a nice character who felt like the voice of reason for Nickel and basically got the least amount of votes every single elimination. And this is when I feel like Baseball is probably at his best in the season, but again, there were still a lot of flaws with Baseball. Baseball always talked about how important it was to him to be the team captain and how he had to lead his team to victory, but it felt like Baseball never really did anything like captain worthy. And what I mean by that is he never led his team to victory really at all. He was never the voice of reason to motivate his team. His team just kind of did the challenges and they'd end up winning or they'd end up losing. And honestly, if there was a captain, it felt like Soap was more of the captain if anything. She actually tried to take charge in challenges when Baseball would kind of just sit back and let everyone do their thing. And as the team captain, I barely saw him interact with anyone besides Suitcase and Nickel the whole season. I can't remember a single time Baseball talked to Trophy, Box, or Cheesy, and he maybe talked to Soap twice. And he only really interacted with Knife and Microphone after the teams had already merged. But undoubtedly, Baseball was a clear fan favorite at the time of the pre-merge with other characters like Lightbulb. But he just felt super boring in the pre-merge. He never did anything. His whole personality was just kind of being like nice-ish, but he wasn't really like a good person. But then when the merge happens, this is when Baseball's character, in my opinion, just becomes actually unbearable. This is also around when the Nickel and Balloon drama became very big in the show, and when Nickel and Balloon would argue and fight and all that sort of stuff, Baseball would try to comfort Suitcase but would never try to comfort Balloon, and his comforts for Suitcase were very lackluster. He tried to make Nickel apologize, but it was pretty obvious Nickel's apologies to Suitcase were very unreal and just like, it just did not feel genuine at all. And all Suitcase really wanted was for them to give Balloon another chance, and a lot of slack got handed towards Nickel, but I feel like Baseball was no better than Nickel was. And then they tried to get Suitcase to stop talking to Balloon, which obviously was going to make Suitcase feel really uncomfortable, and I feel like no one had actual empathetic thoughts towards Suitcase and the whole game besides Balloon, and Nickel and Baseball were supposed to be her best friends and the closest people she had in the game since they were in an alliance, but clearly they were not showing any affection towards Suitcase. And this is when I really feel like Baseball became like undoubtedly the worst character in the whole show, was the episode that Nickel got eliminated and how he acted after Nickel's elimination. In Nickel's elimination, it was 5 votes for Balloon, 1 vote for Nickel, and Suitcase was the person that voted for Nickel. But it was a surprise double elimination, so Nickel ends up getting sent home with Balloon. And this is obviously when their alliance ends, but Baseball just acts so sad and pitiful the rest of the season. He acts super depressed and arrogant towards Suitcase and acts like Suitcase is the worst person in the world. blaming her for Nickel's elimination like Suitcase had any clue that was going to happen, and then just sits in sadness and waits for people to pity him the whole rest of the season. And he never acknowledges him with the fact he did the balloon or Suitcase was wrong at all, and just paints Suitcase as this horrible person to everyone else in the game basically. And he makes it all the way to the final 3, which just blows my mind, because from that point on, baseball does absolutely nothing important in the whole story. It would have made way more sense, it would have been way more interesting to a storyline if it was Test Tube who made it that far, if it was Fanny who made it that far, if it was Paintbrush who made it that far, if it was literally anyone else except for baseball and maybe Marshmallow. And that's just because Marshmallow's story ends there. And that's the one thing I also don't like about baseball, is when there's every single other elimination, it feels like there's a satisfying conclusion. Well, at least for most of them, when it becomes contestant vote, there was no satisfying conclusion for baseball because there was nothing going for him in the first place. He quote-unquote forgives Suitcase when he walks out, like Suitcase needed to be forgived in the first place. And I feel like I'm just sitting there watching his elimination thinking, why did he make it this far for absolutely no reason? Honestly, I feel like it would have been better if baseball got eliminated that episode, except for Nickel. Because at least we see in Inanimate Insanity Invitational, Nickel warm up to Balloon, and you can see him actually change. And I feel like we could have seen that in season 2. But instead we got baseball moping around all the way to the final 3. And that is basically baseball's whole story and his whole character in season 2. Does nothing basically in the premieres except nice, makes the alliance between Nickel and Suitcase, which did have a big impact, claims to be a team leader, and that's what was dragging him back so bad, and he felt like, I was never a good team leader, but I always tried to put the team first, and he didn't, because he didn't talk to half the people on his team. And then he's built to get pitied for, I guess, but there's no reason to pity him because he's just not a good person at all. It just feels like half the time he's stuck in his own delusion of being a team leader, but he actually wasn't a team leader at all. He wanted to be a good team leader so bad that he didn't even end up leading his team in the first place. I feel like cutting baseball off at the time of Balloon's elimination would have been perfect, and seeing Nickel make it that far, and because he would have actually had a character development, would have been solid, perfect. This would have topped off the perfect season of Inanimate Insanity. This season is so good, but the one thing I don't like about this season is baseball.